Want to welcome some guests this morning, Alina and Wolfgang Mieder, our speaker, who will be introduced more fully in a few minutes. And then I know we have some guests online on Zoom. Thank you for joining us. We're going to kick off this meeting with a Rotary Minute from Elizabeth. All right.
Not entirely.
There's an unpolished minute.
My Rotary time has been a lot of getting ready for the Story Slam, as I'm sure many of you have been. And so what I looked into for the Rotary Minute is what other clubs are doing for fundraisers. And I came across a quote that I really liked saying, all clubs should try to identify a flagship community event. If you just fundraise to fundraise, people get tired of you asking. So I'm hoping that the Story Slam will become one of our flagship community events. I was out in the community flagship in Burlington last night, and people were excited about the Story Slam. So that was really good. And then I was looking at some of what other clubs are doing. And this one really struck me. There's a club in Ontario that does a Maple Magic Festival, and it's on an elk and maple syrup farm. And then I was thinking, well, we have someone who has a maple syrup farm here. Because I'm trying to get other ideas of cool things we could do that become community events every year so that, you know, Rotary is seen as more a part of the community. So some of the people I met last night did say they used to bring their kids to the Easter egg hunt and all of that. So that's great. But the Easter egg hunt isn't much of a fundraiser. It's more of just giving, which I love that we do that. So that was just interesting to look at what other clubs are doing. Another club has like a ribs festival where they get like a bunch of people to make ribs and eat them. And some of these events are raising like $50,000 for really small clubs, like, you know, similar size to ours. Like some of the clubs were between 20 and 30 people, all the ones that I was reading about. So I got inspired by that and more excited for our Story Slam. And I was just thinking about all the creative ideas that we could have to raise more money and give more to the community.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth. I learned last week that the Burlington Rotary Club is doing a spelling bee, and they expect to raise $50,000 from their spelling bee event. Now, much of that is coming from sponsors in Burlington, but you can learn from their experience. I'll try to get more information. I don't know the date of that, but it sounds like a really fun event. All right, now we'll have an inspiration from Andy.
Yeah, quickly, but yeah, Elizabeth, I agree. And as the club may know, Sherry, our fundraiser extraordinary, and I've been trying to get the fire station to redo the pancake breakfast, which we can't seem to make it happen. So if anybody has any connections there, or might be able to gently persuade them that this is good for the community and a fundraiser. And the chili cook-off also, if that's resurrected, great. But there were events that kind of died that we as a club have been trying to take over and keep the momentum going, but without luck. Open your heart to happiness. Let every pore absorb light. Swim in the joy of the here and now and cast off the darkness of night. Walk in the summer of sunshine. Fly in the blueness of sky. Know that possibilities are boundless. Understand that nothing can die. Step from the shadows of torment. Sing till your throat gets too sore. Smile for as long as the day is and laugh just a little bit more. Breathe slowly and deeply and listen. Give all your ideas a chance. Let the sun beat down on your goodness and kick off your shoes and dance. Dance by Paul Hayward.
Thank you. All right, just a couple of announcements. For the Bill Skips Story Slam on February 10th, if you intend to buy tickets but have not yet, please try to do that today, and you can talk to Andy about that. If you know you want them, but you don't have the money with you today or what have you, you can still let him know. We want to keep our count of attendees as up to date as possible. We've sold, as of last night, 38 tickets online. We've sold at least, actually more than that offline. So we're heading in really good direction, and we want to make sure you get your tickets before we sell out, as you just might. And then Jen has a brief announcement.
Yeah. Regarding the story slam that so many of us have been working on, we are going to have a poster that acknowledges people who have, or businesses that have donated to it. But we also want to acknowledge every in-kind donation. And none of us on the committee is aware of all of them. So if you know anyone who is giving anything for that night, including time, if they've given time or anything, who isn't a member of the club, or if they've remembered, any in-kind donation, forward them to me so that I can get them to Susan. But we need a quick turnaround on this, because Susan would like it by tomorrow, I believe, to start organizing the poster. But we don't want to miss anyone. People have given a little bit of something. So anything you think of, and my email is on the Rotary page.
Club runner, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Jen. And then Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, the stage sections we're gonna use are 4x8. There's 2 of them. I'm gonna need some help moving them. They're available either this afternoon or tomorrow. I'll need a pickup truck and maybe 3 strong bodies to move these sections. They're very heavy. So I've got 2, I see. Why don't we meet shortly afterwards? We can pick up and I'll just leave it for everyone. Thank you.
Did you get enough people ready?
Yes, yep.
Oh.
Yep. Thanks.
Terrific, great, thank you. All right, any other announcements? All right, without further ado, I'll turn it over to Howard to introduce our speaker.
Watch out for the wire. Good morning.
Morning.
So, I've asked Wolfgang Mieder to be our speaker this morning. Wolfgang has been a friend of Rotary for a number of years at this point. He's told me, I didn't remember how many, but he said there were 5 times he's visited us previously. I think he's in a different standing now because he's a little older and he's not a working stiff as much as he was. Although I don't think he's ever not going to be a guy who gets a lot done. So I'll tell you a few quick things about Wolfgang. Wolfgang is a University Distinguished Professor of German and Folklore in the Department of German and Russian at the University of Vermont. He is Emeritus. He's taught for 50 years, as he points out, that's half a century. While his scholarly work ranges from fairy tales, legends, and folk songs to philological and literary studies. I'll ask anybody if they know the meaning of that word, philology. He specializes in international proverb studies. His work's been recognized with international prizes and honorary degrees. He's written extensively. Wolfgang and his wife Barbara have been happy and thankful residents of Williston, right on Echo Road, next to the health center. And as he says, you might recognize their home by the daffodils you see in the spring when you go down.
That's my wife doing it.
Yeah.
Take credit for that.
Wolfgang's subject for the day is apropos in our times, government of the people, by the people, for the people, the making and meaning of an American proverb of democracy. Wolfgang, thanks for being here. Thank you.
You don't want the bell.
Well, first of all, thank you for being here and thank you for letting me come once again. I've always enjoyed talking to local clubs in Vermont. As you probably know, there's the Ollie organization. I sometimes go down to Springfield or talk to Rotary in Burlington, and as Howard said, 5 times here. And when I came to America in 1960 as a 16-year-old kid, I wound up in a funeral home. And my American father at the time was a big Rotary man. And so I always remember when I wasn't even 17, I gave my first talk at a Rotary club. And the topic was why Germany was divided. And I, to this day, don't know how in the hell I got that material together as a high school kid, but I somehow pulled it off. And thankful forever, I got a $250 scholarship from Rotary to go to college. You know, notice, 1961, that $250, that was a wonderful, big help for me. And since I was in America by myself, I financed my 8-year university training by myself. And just to show you it can be done, I did walk out without a penny debt. I scrubbed floors, I washed dishes, I mowed the lawns, you know, and it can be done. I think universities are more expensive today, but you know, there are also so many more things the young people want. I didn't have to have a computer, I didn't have to have a record player, I didn't have to have a phone. That makes a big difference. Anyhow, I was kind of nice to see that Bill Skiff was the founder of your club in 1995. By chance, Barbara brought home the Observer, and as you know, the article was in there, so I kind of have known Bill Skiff for a long time. And Howard has taken good care of my teeth, so don't look too close. You know, Barbara doesn't like to go see Howard, but I do. I go to the dentist, strangely enough. I don't know why, but I always look forward to the 2 of us. Well, in the Wall Street Journal, by the way, I need to know, I can talk to you all morning, but what time am I supposed to be done?
I think we should wrap up, including questions around 8:50.
Okay. If you maybe by chance read the Wall Street Journal on Wednesday, November 9th, 2022. There was an article in it that said Lincoln's vision of democracy. And it was written because November 19th, as you know, in 1863 is when Abraham Lincoln, our treasured president, gave this famous Gettysburg Address. And so the article kind of wanted to draw attention to that. And it deals, in fact, with what I'm going to talk about today. And the journalist said, the least well-examined words of the address, Gettysburg, however, are its expensive triplet: government of the people, by the people, for the people. This wasn't merely a rhetorical flourish. In that triplet, Lincoln lays out the 3 fundamental elements of democracy. The first is consent, government of the people. A second distinguished feature of democracy is the people's voice in the affairs of government by the people. And the third basic element of democracy is a government that serves the interests of the people, government for the people. Well, I'm just having some fun. The journalist didn't know that little Wolfgang had long worked on this expression. You know, shows you you need to do a little bit more work. When Howard asked me to come and talk to you today, I am wondering what I maybe could mention to you. I thought we needed uplifting morning talk. It's early in the morning. You don't want to go home depressed. And since we are in a strange turmoil throughout the world. I think we need something a little bit more positive. And this idea, this fundamental definition of democracy, I don't think there is a better definition of democracy than government of the people, by the people, and for the people. The question is, who came up with that idea? Many of us think, believe, claim that it was Abraham Lincoln. Well, that's going to be a problem this morning. I'm not going to dethrone my hero, Abraham Lincoln. Well, could I? He's much taller than I am. But no, I'm not going to do that. But as so often, we attach certain phrases to historical figures. And it's perfectly fine for all of us to think that Lincoln, notice the verb I'm using, coined it, and that he kind of didn't. Okay? So there are other Lincoln statements that we all love. House divided against itself cannot stand. Remember? Famous Stephen Douglas debates before the Civil War. Well, that is the Bible, Mark 3:25. And Lincoln knew his Bible, as did the abolitionists. Let us have faith that right makes might. That wonderful statement he gave in New York, also before the Civil War. 14th century English proverb, right makes might. And the same proverb exists the other way around. Might makes right. I found them both in the 14th century. That shows you that proverbs are not universal truth. They can contradict, just like our lives are full of contradictions. So proverbs are not a philosophical system or a logical system for that matter. They're there and they represent generalizations, observations that people like you and I have made, put into a succinct sentence, and we repeat it. And don't swap horses in middle stream. We're out fitting today. And that damn proverb comes up every re-election when the president runs for the second term. Or Governor Scott could use it if he wants to run for another term, right? Not Lincoln's. And Lincoln has said, I didn't say it. I heard it from a Dutch farmer, immigrant farmer in Illinois. He said so. I traced it back to 1834. It certainly predates anything that Lincoln had to say. But to us, it is Abraham Lincoln, right? Well, so where does government of the people, by the people, for the people come from? The earliest I found is in a book called Some Information Respecting America, that a person whom we all don't know, Thomas Cooper, wrote in 1794 to inform a British friend what the American government is all about. And he said, there's little fault to find with the government of America, I don't know, either in principle or in practice. We have very few taxes to pay. We have no animosities about religion. We have few respecting political men or political measures. Now it comes. The government is the government of the people and for the people. So you can already see it's started. This is 1794. Well, a person whom you know very well, Daniel Webster, in a famous Senate address in 1830, comes a little bit closer. It is the people's constitution, the people's government, made for the people, made by the people, and answerable to the people. It's not quite there yet, though. The people of the United States have declared that this constitution shall be the supreme law. We must either admit the proposition or dispute the authority. The state, this hits right what we're doing, going through with abortion rights and everything right now. Listen, the states are unquestionably sovereign in Texas, so far as their sovereignty is not affected
by this supreme constitutional law. That is the whole issue about sovereignty of the states and so on, right? So this struggle that we have today has been around throughout our history, really. Well, here comes a man whom I really admire, Theodore Parker. And it's okay if you have never heard of him. We will get around to equally or even more important people in a moment. Theodore Parker was a white minister, an abolitionist, and he, on May 29, 1850, gave a very important speech called The Slave Power in America. Now, this is in 1850, so that certainly predates the Gettysburg Address of 1863, right? Now, listen very carefully what he has to say, because he is not the president. He can say whatever he wants. Later on, we'll get around to the fact that Lincoln cannot say whatever he wants. You see? So here is what Theodore Parker said. It's amazing. There is what I call the American idea. I so name it because it seems to me to lie at the basis of all our truly original, distinctive, and American institutions. It is itself a complex idea. I mean, I think we all agree with this. He could give that talk today. It is a complex idea, composed of three subordinate and more simple ideas, namely, you're an American mind, this is all wonderful. The idea that all men are unalienable, have unalienable rights. And remember, the word men is generic. The ladies in the crowd feel that, although they were. Get to that. That in respect thereof, all men are created equal. Of course, we know that. And that government is to be established and sustained for the purpose of giving every man opportunity for the enjoyment and development of all these unalienable rights. We know that from the Declaration. Now it comes. Parker, don't forget it. Theodore Parker. The idea demands a democracy. He could have said the definition of democracy is. The idea demands a democracy. That is a government of all the people, by all the people, for all the people. That's a heck of a way more general and more inclusive than what dear friend Abe had to say. So the question is, why didn't Abe say it? He knew Theodore Parker. We know for a fact what speeches like this in America in the 19th century were printed, and they were handed out as pamphlets. The first biographer of Lincoln, William Herndon, he says so, took the pamphlets to Lincoln, and we know Lincoln read them. So when he wrote his Gettysburg Address, he obviously had this triplet or triad on his mind. But he's the president. Can he go so far as to include the word all? Remember, we were a slave-holding country. Women didn't get the right to vote with the 19th Amendment until 1920. Black men, 15th Amendment, 1870. So if Lincoln had included the word all, I'm trying to defend him here a little bit. If he had included the word all, it would have been revolutionary. It would, of course, have been great if he had done it. But maybe Gettysburg wasn't the right time. An American president, I think, cannot be extreme. you have to find somewhat of a middle road to pull the people along. So I think it was a conscious decision on Lincoln's part, not an oversight, to drop out the word all. Do I wish that he had included it? Of course. Of course. But I am convinced that he chose not to. He was way too smart not to have realized what Parker had said. Parker, of course, didn't have the influence that the president had. So, but I wish Bill Skiff were here. I have the feeling that he still memorized the Gettysburg Address, but I want to ask you, there are some people of my age here, did you memorize the Gettysburg Address when you were in high school? Look at that. Raise your hand. I'm
King hand.
Look at that.
Yeah.
Look at that. I don't think, Barbara and I once, Marty, you know, we used to go to the Vermont Council of Humanities annual sessions. And we had a wonderful presentation by high school students of the Gettysburg Address. I remember that. But if you ask my beloved UVM students right now, and I taught a class on lecture class on proverbs. They have not memorized it. Thank God they still know it. 272 words, that's all that it is. So they're really, but anyhow, if you go to any classroom today and ask that question, you know, the answer is basically no. Anyhow, for our memory's sake, November 19, 1863, 77 years ago. Well, that's already an issue. What does that mean, 77? There you already start. Well, I am almost 80 old. Okay, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So he knows what he's doing, voting the Declaration, of course. Now we are engaged in the great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. Then he winds up, it is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth for freedom, as you know, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. By the way, knowing that Lincoln, which was normal in all of the rhetoric of the 19th century, was deeply steeped in the Bible. That last element, shall not perish from the earth, I am quite convinced he is quoting the Bible, where there is no vision, the people shall perish. Proverbs 29:18. Anyhow, so Lincoln dropped out the word all, and then came, luckily for Lincoln, then came Frederick Douglass. Now he's my real hero. Frederick Douglass, you all know, the famous, you know, I have this dream. I wish I were as handsome as Frederick Douglass. If he were standing here, he would tower this high, certainly of me, broad shoulders, beautiful hair, and any time the intellectual equal of Abraham Lincoln. I've done a book on Douglass called No Struggle, No Progress. And he was self-taught. Well, so was Lincoln, of course, basically. But Douglass never went to school. And yet, his volumes of writings are an intellectual challenge, an intellectual joy, just is worse. And I wish that our modern politicians would pay a little bit more attention to their language, a little bit higher level rhetoric, maybe, not just sound bites. Well, Douglas, I am here to advocate a genuine democratic republic, to make this a republican form of government, purely a republic, a genuine republic. Make it a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. This is in 1867, after the Gettysburg Address. So Douglas will have read Theodore Parker, no doubt about it. But he's picking up what Lincoln has said without the all. But he goes on. And don't you love this? Look at this. A genuine republic, make it the government of the people, by the people, for the people. Then he remembers Theodore Parker and says, and for all the people, each for all and all for each. But he is not the president. He can say that. He's an abolitionist. He's fighting for freedom. So blot out all discrimination against any person, theoretically or practical, and make it conform to the great truths laid down by the fathers. Keep no man from the ballot box or jury box or the cartridge box because of his color. And now for the ladies, exclude no woman from the ballot box because of her sex. That's only 4 years after Lincoln's address, done by an African-American former slave. That's the greatness of our country. Lincoln knew well what equal he had in Frederick Douglass. He invited him to come to the White House. That was a remarkable step. Okay, I said the ladies in the house. Couple ladies I really like is Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, two 19th century feminists. This is really a great moment for our phrase. Stanton, that little roundish woman with, I don't know, 7 children, I believe. I once wrote a book on those two ladies. For 50 years, teaching at UVM for UVM is nothing. Those ladies for 50 years traveled by horse and buggy, train, snow, rain, to the country advocating for women's rights. 50 years. There was a meeting in Washington on March 25, 1888, to welcome the International Council of Women. So little Cady Stanton gets up there and gives her speech. The women from many lands have assembled at last to claim their rightful place as equal factors in the great movements of the 19th century. I love this. In the old world, they have governments and people. Here, we have a government of the people, by the people, for the people. And then she made a pause. And everybody thought, what's wrong with that lady? Is she going to go on? In the publication, there's a dash. We have a government of the people, by the people. That is, we soon shall have, when that important half, called women, are enfranchised, and the laboring masses know how to use the power they possess. Wonderful. I mean, that is phenomenal rhetoric. She thought about what she was going to say. Little element of surprise. Well, anyhow. But as I told you, neither Stanton nor Elizabeth, Susan B. Anthony lived long enough to have the 19th Amendment in 1920 passed. So, but anyhow, they certainly worked for it. We are doing well. We have, what, 7 more minutes?
10 more minutes.
Okay, well, I'll let a few things go. I have some quotations by Theodore Roosevelt. But I want to read, you still remember Carl Sandburg, right? Carl Sandburg, Carl Sandburg was pushed a little bit in the shadow because our beloved Robert Frost. And I understand that. Robert Frost is the more lyrical poet. Good fences make good neighbors, miles to go, all those wonderful lines we know. But Carl Sandburg, I fell in love with him. I took an American literature class as a high school student after I just come to America. And I just loved his Chicago poems because I could identify with him as a young immigrant. And you also know that he wrote that multi-volume biography of Lincoln, which is almost a work of art, really. And he also wrote a little poem. And if you have time, he wrote a book called The People, Yes, in 1936. It's about 200 pages long. It's a little bit like Walt Whitman. It's a kind of a stream of thought poem, rambling on, so to speak. But it shows our whole country, immigrants, language, you name it. And there's a few lines in there. He says, Lincoln, with a question mark, Lincoln. He was a mystery. I like this. He was a mystery in smoke and flags. Saying yes to the smoke, the war, right? Yes to the flags. Yes to the paradoxes of democracy. Yes to the hopes of government. Of the people, by the people, for the people. Wonderful, isn't it? So Sandburg remembers the Gettysburg Address, of course. But I think, if you have a chance to pick up the book, The People, yes, you can get it easily up in Amazon. I think you would enjoy reading it. One of my earliest papers I published, maybe in 1973, was on this book. And I took it over to my dear colleagues in the English department. And they said, Wolfgang, why are you working with Carl Sandburg? Nobody pays attention to him anymore. I said, I remember, smart aleck whippersnapper. I said, well, maybe you should. You can get away with that with a good colleague. Well, Truman, all the rest of the people, of course, used it. Why don't I jump to Barack Obama? And Kennedy, of course, as well. But again, Barack Obama really did pay a lot of attention to the language he used. So in 2009, we all remembered, he traveled to, what was it, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and then to Washington, D.C. to give his inaugural address. The early patriots were willing to put all they were and all they had on the line. Their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor, for a set of ideals that continue to light the world. Beautifully put, to light the world. The thing that I like is that he did not use the word that I really hate. Howard said, I'm a philologist. Howard claims that I taught him that word. Philology is a wonderful word. Philology includes all the things that I happen to be interested in, languages, folklore, linguistics, and so on. Anyhow, that continue well. That we are equal. Okay. That our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness come from our laws. And that government of, by, and for the people can endure. So you can see he's quoting everything we know, which means, of course, he's pulling us along in his speech, doesn't he? We identify with it and identify with him. That's what he does. It was these ideals that led us to declare independence and craft our Constitution, producing documents that were imperfect, but had within them, like our nation itself, the capacity to be made more perfect. The word I was going to mention that I don't like is American exceptionalism. I despise that term. We are a good country. We try hard, but democracy is always in progress. It is never finished. And it is hubris to run around the world to say that we are the best. We're good. We can make it more perfect. Nothing wrong with that. But I think, well, anyhow, Bernie Sanders, as you remember, he had it as a hashtag, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. That is kind of, let's wind up with President Biden. Joe Biden, from the beginning, nothing has been guaranteed about him. He's right on this. From the beginning, nothing has been guaranteed about democracy in America. Every generation has had to defend it, protect it, preserve it, choose it. Well, that's what democracy is. It's a choice, a decision of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's more than a soundbite. And I think Joe Biden did a good job with that statement. All around, so I think I'm right in my time. Huh? All around, what I want to leave you with, I think, is if you compare the rhetoric of the 19th century with the political rhetoric we have today, I think we have a little bit of catch up to do. A little bit, you know, I'm not picking on anybody, but if you look at some of the addresses lately, they are based, and if you see them printed out on the internet, they are basically 1-2 sentence sound bites. There is no continuity of thought or development of an idea. It's just tidbits that we are fed rather than an uplifting talk where we can say, yes, I kind of agree, or maybe no, I don't, but I'm willing to listen to you. And I'm not being screamed at or bombarded with, as I said, tidbits and sound bites. So I always try to convince my students to take pride in language. You know, the English language is one of the richest languages of the world. One of the reasons why we so often can think of two words for the same thing is that you have the whole tradition of the Germanic languages and all of the tradition of the Romance languages joined in the English language with vocabulary of a solid 500,000 independent words. I can create almost any word in German, but that is not a word as such. That's just combining words. These are individual words. So to take pride in the language and to find a way to express ourselves and guide our world together with others into a free and democratic world. I think the English language can do a good job. After all, it has become the lingua franca of the world. Latin will not come back. Well, I hope I can come back sometime. Thank you for letting me come.
Thank you very much.
Time for questions?
Yeah, sure.
So thank you very much. I'm sure we all enjoyed that. If I did the math correctly, you arrived in 1960 and you were 16. Do you mind sharing a little bit about your journey from 1944 to 1960?
Well, I was born in Leipzig, which is, you know, one of the large cities, which formerly East Germany. And after the war, my family wound up in Lübeck, which is a beautiful city on the Baltic Sea. Lübeck was the queen of the Hanseatic League, which had cities like Hamburg and so on in them. And started school. And in 1960, I would say that most of my classmates had a dream of coming to America for a year as an exchange student. And, well, you know, let's see cars, rock and roll, you know, anything a young kid gets excited about. And there were wonderful programs. Some of you know them, Youth for Understanding, American Field Service. My wife, in fact, went with Youth for Understanding over to Holland as an exchange student. But anyhow, so I had the good fortune, or not so good fortune. I took the test with AFS, and then it was determined I was too young, because remember when an exchange student comes, they usually become seniors in America. So I was a little bit too young, but I by chance met an American-German journalist. And I wrote him a letter in Detroit and said, and included a little passport picture and said, would you mind putting a story in the paper saying that a little German boy would like to come to America, is looking for families. Well, 12 families said, let the boy come. So I came. That was my luck. And I say this emotion and thankfulness, my parents and my sister, I begged them not to make me come back home. It wasn't very nice. I fell in love with America, young kid. Anyhow, so on my birthday in 1961, I got a telegram. I still have all this stuff. Telegram saying, you may stay.
Wow.
So that was a dream fulfilled. I didn't go home for 4 years. But it's one of those, not unique, but it's one of those modern immigrant stories of a person who wanted to come. Notice when we talk immigrants, there are so many different types of us. I wanted to come. I wasn't escaping anybody, maybe a rich father, a rigid father. Maybe slightly, but anyhow, I wanted, I don't know, for whatever reason, to go my own way, but but it was a dream. But most of my friends, of course, had to go. That's my point. They had to go back after 1 year. Since I didn't come on the program, once I got the permission to stay, I lucked out. Any other question? When you ask, I get this question a lot. When you ask, where does this expression come from? It basically becomes a research project. Now, many proverbs we will never know, but we can trace them. And many of the proverbs that you know go all the way back to the wisdom literature of the Near East, certainly the Quran and the Bible. You have proverbs like the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, exists in all major religions. I only wish we could live accordingly. So many proverbs that you and I know go back to Greek and Roman antiquity. That's one element. Big fish eat little fish. Time flies way back, all the way, as far back as you can trace written, recorded language. The second set are religious texts, the Bible, for us, let's just say. Then another set is medieval Latin. Medieval Latin was the lingua franca all the way through the Middle Ages. So if you had gone to school in the Middle Ages, you would have studied Latin. And proverbs were used and created to do translation exercise. So strike while the iron is hot. Things like that. Not everything is gold that glitters. Are going back to medieval Latin times. And then you have all the proverbs where we will never know who started them. But now it is the English lingua franca, the American English, that influences the world with new proverbs. Go big or go home. Shit happens.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. 1,000 words. The grass is always greener on the other side. You'd be surprised. Those proverbs are trickling into, in Germany, where many people speak English, they're cited in English most of the time, but they're also, of course, translated. Howard wants me to get out of here.
Thank you for coming. Wolfgang. I'm glad you decided to stay. And, as a token, our club makes a donation for the first and mentoring program.
But I want to make a donation to your speech jam. Who do I give the money to? I carry lots of it in
You
my
you
pocket.
can come to Andy, oh, can I, well, then can I ask you to do one more?
Oh, yeah,
little
sure.
thing for-
Oh.
Please pull a raffle and read the last three.
Last three.